little bit louder. I can't hear you, hon.
Maybe it means that he took away all the candy bars.
Yes. This article is about candy and how it is being taken away from the classrooms. You know, this author needed to think about the audience. This author needed to think, okay, if my audience is the public reading, what type of information would I need to share? And we find those information through questions.
Near the end of the school year, Nicole Lautson's 5th grade class in New Hampshire is hard at work on a multi-genre research project on the Lewis and Clark expedition. Like Cheryl's nutrition piece, this culminating project reinforces what the students have learned in a content area, in this case, social studies. But in addition to bringing social studies content into the writing workshop, Nicole is also doing the reverse. She's extending skills from writing workshop to social studies. The students have researched and taken notes on topics related to Lewis and Clark. Now they're preparing to write one of their multi-genre pieces, a newspaper article. To get them started, Nicole gives the students her own notes so they can practice organizing the research.
The questions that I get from teachers are usually about, how do I fit that in? You know, I have so many things I'm supposed to teach. How do I fit in time for the kids to write or for the kids to read? And I think the way to do that is through projects like the multi-genre project we're doing now. It's a social studies project, but they're doing a ton of reading and writing within that project. So all the students in the class are doing a multi-genre piece about Lewis and Clark's westward journey. And then within that, each student has the opportunity to choose a more narrow focus, which for some kids might be Fort Mandan, where they spent their first winter. For other kids, they're really interested in learning about the animals and plants that they discovered. Other students are focusing on some of the main people involved, whether it be Lewis or Clark or Sacagawea. So then they focus on something more narrow, and then the majority of their pieces will be about that more narrow focus for research. Here's the problem. We have all these notes and all this information, right? We know what a newspaper article is supposed to look like, right? So what we need to figure out is how to take all those notes and make it into a newspaper article. Okay, so what we're going to be working on today is organizing our notes. To get a little bit of practice with this, I've actually written up some notes myself. So first you're going to take my notes and try to organize them and see how that goes. Then we'll talk about that, and then you'll move on to your own. All right, so I decided to take notes on what it was like when they reached the Pacific. Because I have this idea in my head that when they got there, it was like, la! Everyone was so excited. So I wanted to find out more information about that. And what I really found out is the weather was awful. They were pinned down in a camp for 5 days. They couldn't even get to the ocean because the weather was so bad. And it wasn't that big of a deal. But I wanted to research about that. So what I want you to do today is there are 2 pages of notes. 1, 2. And you're going to work in groups of 3. And what I want you to do is I want you to cut them up just like we did when we did our Building Big Research and organize them. How do you think you can go about organizing notes for a newspaper article? In what way do you think you can organize them? It's going to depend on different notes, but what do you think?
Like who, that, when,
So you might have an envelope about who, an envelope about what happened, where it happened, when it happened, and why. Does that sound like a good system? Okay, we might try that. Julia, other ideas?
Also, you could sort your notes as like first paragraph, second paragraph, like third.
But I really want a topic for each of those things. So what might the topic for your first paragraph be?
Like summary or like just like quick like back through statistics to summarize the event.
Okay, you might have an envelope that's statistics because you might want to have that. Brandon, what do you think?
Basically organizing it like we did with Building Big.
Yep. So all the information that goes together, you need to bundle together into an envelope, but you need to figure out what those categories are going to be. And then once you have your categories, then you can take it and put it in the order that you want, okay? So can we just give this a try, and then we'll come back together and share in a little bit about how it's going?
Or maybe we could put that in here because it says the first spotting of the Pacific, so that obviously means they were on the Columbia River.
Yeah.
Lewis was not with Clark when Clark reached the Pacific.
Oh, so I see you've taken some notes right on here.
Yeah, because then if we just did it all jumbled up, then it would be kind of hard.
So you read it through, and so you said this was a when, who, when, where. And so then you're going to bundle them by those categories? Sorry, did I take your seat? Okay. Were there any notes that you discovered that didn't fit?
Well, kind of. Because some of them were like both at the same time, but because they had like two information ones that like.
So what are you going to do with those kinds of notes that answer two questions?
We're gonna make them like what it fits most, like what it fits more, because it fits more of one and a little less than of the other.
Okay, that sounds great. So it sounds like you have a great system. How did you decide to do this particular organization system?
Maddie actually came up with it.
That's a great idea. Do you think that this might help you when you sit down to organize your own notes?
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you think you might do something similar, John?
Yeah, because this is like what I kind of did with my other notes and for building big.
Okay.
So.
Great.
Because it's really easy because you just organize it, cut them out, put them in the envelopes, and it's done.
Tim, what do you think? Do you think you might use this system when you go to organize your notes?
Definitely.
Maddie, I'm wondering when we come back for our share at the end of this, if you would be willing to share the method that you use to go about this, because I think that might be helpful to people. Would you be willing to do that?
I think that would be helpful.
You think that would be helpful?
Maybe half the class.
Yeah, it would help other people too.
Okay, great. I see that this is a lot of information. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 facts. Do you see this as a paragraph or more like this could go under one heading with a couple of paragraphs in it? What do you think? Greg, what were you going to say? You think it might be a couple of paragraphs?
Some of the information is not directly tied.
Me and John are going to start organizing.
Okay. Okay, so maybe what you could do next, because you guys have done a great job, and I like how you came up with kind of a unique system, is to think about your facts and then think about, okay, how could I break these into paragraphs? Like what facts really belong together in paragraphs? And then what you could do is paperclip those things within an envelope. What do you think? Yeah. Okay?
Here, I'll go into the what's.
So do you think that going through this process as a model, is this going to help you do your own notes? Did you cut them out first? Did you read through them first? Cut them out. Think that's enough?
Okay, so we have, this is kind of, we have the first spotting of the Pacific when they arrived, and that Lewis was not with Clark when they arrived.
What strategies did you use to begin to organize them? What'd you do? Maddie, would you mind sharing your strategy? Because I feel like that was a good strategy that maybe other people might be able to use.
Well, we didn't want to cut up anything first, so
Do you
we
want to actually come up here?
So we read up through the notes first, and
So you read through the notes first?
yeah, and what we did is when we read the first note, we figured out if it was a who, what, when, where, or why. And we would write it down on the note, and then we would go to the next one. And then when we were finished, we would cut them all up. We would see on the little notes if it was like if in the corner, if it was like a who, what, when, where, or why. And it would be easier to organize. So
Excellent.
we wouldn't have to jot it up.
Okay, so what she did is she read the notes first and then labeled right on the note if it was a who, what, where, when, and why, and then they just used those as their categories. So that might be a really great strategy. So first, read and label notes, then cut apart. Okay? Other strategies that worked for people. Julia, what did you do?
Well, my group, we cut them up first, and we had 2 people cutting, and we had someone reading as we cut them.
But we realized that the who, what, where, when, and why wasn't going to really work for us because we knew that a lot of the categories wouldn't make sense because, I mean, like, we know who the who was, and that was the core of discovery. Like, we know where the where was, it was the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
So we just kind of looked at the facts and picked a little more, like, specific topics.
Okay.
After the lesson on organizing notes, Nicole's fifth graders apply what they've learned to their own research. As the children work, Nicole confers informally with individual students about their choices. The next day, she starts writing workshop by asking the students to report on their progress. What problems did they encounter? And what went well?
I found out that I just need more notes than I thought I would need.
Yeah, it's frustrating sometimes, huh?
Yeah, and I'm working on those right now. Been looking for those, been reading a long article, and yeah.
Okay. I think a lot of people found that when they cut all their notes apart, they're like, wow, I don't really have quite enough yet to answer my question, so we might have to go back and do a little bit more.
I had some difficult. He's like Andy did. I had to do some more notes too, and I had to like look in the papers and stuff and do that whole process again. Then I cut them out, and then I started my article, and then Trevor just read the title.
Sure, of course.
Lewis's tragic fall finds its way to a mysterious flower.
So if you were to see that heading, that headline, in an article, Lewis's tragic fall finds its way to a mysterious flower, do you think you'd want to read on?
Yeah.
Awesome job, Maddie. So that's something we can think about. We didn't really talk about that today, and Billy pointed out I didn't have a headline for my article yet. You need to have an article that's really going to catch your reader's attention. So you're going to talk about when he discovered the lady slipper?
Yes.
Fabulous. Okay.
At the end of their fifth grade year, Nicole's students are tackling a complex writing task, one that requires them to compile, analyze, and synthesize information. With their teachers' support and guidance, they've come a long way on the path toward writing competency and independence. But regardless of where children are on the continuum, from wide-eyed third graders on the first day of class to seasoned fifth graders getting ready to move on to middle school, they all want to express themselves, to share their experiences and ideas with an audience. And the best thing teachers can do for these young writers is to give them the time, space, and tools they need to succeed.